So hi all, my name is Murali Jagannathan. I am an assistant professor in the Building Technology, Construction Materials and Management Division, BTCM Division of Department of Civil Engineering at IIT Madras. In the day of today, what we are having here is on this TLC2 workshop, and we have a very distinguished speaker today for our workshop, Dr. Hemanta Doloi, who is an associate professor and the director of Smart Villages, Smart Villages at University of Melbourne, and just asking him a few questions today to know what he feels about what we do here at TLC2 and how do we connect the work that he's doing with what our objectives here at TLC2. So welcome, sir, and thank you so much for being with us. And I attended your presentation just now, and it was really wonderful, and the way you have brought in the ideas of bridging the rural and the urban divide, because the moment we say anything about sustainability, what comes to our mind, or smart, what comes to our mind is the urban areas. But you have now kindled this thought in us that it's not enough if urban areas are smart, but the big support for urban areas, that is the rural areas, have to be smart, but at the same time we need to respect the local cultures and tradition, and that's how we take this and make it more sustainable. So just a couple of questions about your journey in this wonderful thought that you have built over years. So where did it all start, your entire idea of smart villages?
Thank you, Professor Murali. So it's a pleasure to be with you. As you said, I lead the Smart Villages program at the University of Melbourne. And when it comes to the smart villages, it is not about basically the villages in Australia or any other particular place, which is a global village we talk about, and more so is the Indian villages.
Right.
I came from India originally with my strong Indian heritage. I can see and I can relate very, very well Indian rural landscape, and so as the rural villages and how people live there. And most importantly, as you said, where it all started with the global warming, for example, the climate crisis that we are all having it today. So maybe 50 years back, it was not that important. So 50 years back, we were thinking about how to modernize the people in the urban setting, so that how we can get the rural people into the urban lifestyle, so that they all enjoy the sophisticated lifestyle and all the amenities that we can expect in the urban areas, and these villagers were not quite getting it, and how we can bring them that equity into the urban settings. That was the discussion perhaps back in 50 years back.
Right.
But today in this climate, where the climate is warming, climate is changing, and we can see more and more CO2 is being emitted by our urban development, more about concrete development in the urban settings. So I think we are at the verge of seriously thinking about how we can alternatively develop those rural areas without emitting the same kind of carbon through the brick and mortar development that we have had in our cities. So that is where it all started.
Right.
And talking about the climate change and the global community, in this planet we have got a good 8 billion people, and out of good 8 billion people, about 40% people are still in rural areas.
Right.
And if you look at the Indian scale, as in India, as a country, 1.6 billion people, which is about 17 to 18% of the global population here in India. And out of that, in India, about good 80% people are still in the rural pockets.
Right.
We do have about 7 lakhs villages in India, and those villages, if we develop in the same way as we have developed our cities with the urban, with the brick and mortar kind of development over last many centuries, I think that is where our planet is going to be quite unsustainable, and that is the reason why we need to really bring the concerted voice together, all the dots together, all the effort together across our academia and the practitioners, so that we seriously think about an alternative carbon negative development for the rural communities, not only in India but across the globe.
Right. So taking a cue from what you said just now, that you are not looking only at India but across the globe. So you, having spent a good lot of time of your career in Australia as an academic, and also having your roots in rural Assam, so where do you see the Indian villages when compared to what is happening in the world around? Specifically, if you can take the example of Australia. So how do you compare the extent of globalization or extent of changes that's happening in the villages?
Again, a great question, Professor Murali, and thank you for asking that question. And as you can see that, because with my root coming from India, coming from the very remote place in the state of Assam, and I was born in a village, And even though I have gone because of my other academic and economic opportunities to other country, and Australia I call as home today, but more and more I can connect those roots, and then I can see how I can as a professional not only connect to the roots but also can contribute something from the scientific point of view in terms of maintaining that kind of rural culture and the heritage, yet developing them in a very much carbon in the climate positive manner.
Right.
That is what basically I am very much interested in. And as you mentioned, I started with my civil engineering degree, like a traditional civil engineering degree with all the traditional academic pathway, followed by the PhD at the University of Sydney in Australia, and then finally working in the University of Melbourne in the construction management program. So I have been doing all the mainstream construction management activities through my academic and kind of career. But over the time, when I got connected with India and Assam, and more importantly, that the collaborative funding opportunities that came from the government of Assam, good $2 million they were giving us with, for setting up a collaboration with the University of Melbourne, being the top institution in the country, with the government of Assam, to work on this very important element of rural development, but in a alternative manner, so that we can develop these people in a much more sustained manner from the bottom up. And when I started with that opportunity coming from Assam and with that collaborative funding arrangement, I think I become very, very interested. But initially I was not quite sure how I can, my roads, the journey is going to go in this particular research path. But more and more I started working with them, and more importantly when I started collecting the primary data across 39 villages in Assam, so I could see that the villagers have got more than what we otherwise can imagine, because if you start collecting the data is the king. So if you have the empirical data collected directly from the communities level at the grassroots, then you can understand these people much more better. And immediately after that, and you can see, if you look at some of the central policies or the top-down policies, then you can immediately see the mismatch, because what people need and what they are crying for is not what the top-down policies are able to give in short term. So eventually that is where my research becomes very, very important, because if you start building from the bottom up with the empirical data coming from the grassroots level, you can literally work it out basically what do they have, what are the immediate needs, and how you can define the interventions so that these people can immediately get the benefit and become empowered in their own right. So if you do that, so what happens then, we not only empower the communities in the grassroots level, but also sustain them, and they do not need to get out, they become much more resilient, and then eventually they become very self-contained within their own jurisdiction, and that is where we can see that these people are not necessary to come to the cities to clog our existing, clog cities more, and then competing for the same, the scarce resources. So I think the whole idea, then with that kind of idea, the direct intervention planning that we are trying to look at the grassroots level, eventually gives us that idea that, look, these people can be developed in the rural settings where we can actually contain our that balance of that 60% and the 40% in the global level as well. And because both the communities, 60% in the urban and 40% in the rural, they have a complementing offer. So what rural can offer, global can, the urban cannot offer, what urban can offer, rural can offer. So that complementation, if we can work it out, that is where the harmonization can take place, and that is where we can see a sustained world. And that is where my research becomes very interesting, and more I do the work, more I get excited about it, and with my Indian heritage and the value, so that makes me much more emotionally connected to this grassroots level problem.
Yeah. One last question before we wind up. Technologies for low carbon and lean construction here at IIT Madras, as you know, you have been associated with us for quite a long time, and we have the vision of looking at the sustainability of not only the materials part of it, but also the construction management or the process part of it, is what we call lean construction. So your idea of smart villages, where does it fit in the overall objectives of TLC2, and where do you think could be a strong collaboration between what TLC2 does and what you're doing?
Excellent question again, and I would say that TLC2 and IIT Madras and your kind of high-end technological research is very much at the core of the smart villages development.
Right.
Because smart villages we cannot simply develop with the all keeping traditional materials and traditional way of building those houses and the infrastructure. Infrastructure is needed, and infrastructure connectivity is also very important in this day and age.
Right.
So if the rural communities are not connected to the urban communities, then there is a lack, and that lack something that we cannot afford at this point in time. And in order to have the right sort of infrastructure and the connectivity and resilient development of those communities, and we need to have the technology, and this technology is pretty much happening at the institutions like IIT Madras,
Right.
and TLC2 is one of the entities where the technology is not being innovated here, but also technology with the low carbon.
Right.
That is what our target is. So smart villages and rural development we are looking at as an alternative development for climate positive development into the future.
Great.
And that is where that low carbon kind of research coming from this elite institution is an important element for us to actually blend that technology along with the tradition, so that we get the resilient kind of communities in that rural areas, and we can build them up from the bottom up, molding their heritage and values and culture along with the technology, so that it becomes a much more sustainable development over time. So that is what basically I can say, that these kind of institutions and this kind of research is at the core of our development in the smart villages.
Right. So thank you very much, Professor Hemanta, and thank you for being with us and spending your valuable time with us, and looking forward for great collaboration between TLC2 and Smart Villages.
Thank you,
Thank you
Professor
so much.
Murali, and it is a pleasure, and we'll keep in touch.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thanks.